Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Plotlines. I'm your host, Connor, and today we're going to be talking about The Scarlet and the Black. This is sort of a movie discussion, also going into some of the historical parts of it. I've been doing some research, but I'm sort of casual. I sort of realized I should be doing research into the historical element of it a little later than I should have, because for whatever reason it didn't dawn on me that this might have some I might be able to find a book to read about it, and I did later, but I only read about half of it. But anyways, I have the Supreme Puntiff Jeff with me to discuss the movie. He suggested this, so we're going to get into that. But first, I have a video that I found on Twitter that I want to react to.
And I have not seen this, so we'll see.
Yeah.
Excuse me, sir. Might I interest you in having your soul saved from eternal damnation? It's for a really good cause.
Thanks, Sonny, but I'm already saved. You see?
I'm a Catholic.
Okay.
Wow. That is how some people, I'm sure, see it. And I honestly, I think we've discussed, I'm a convert, and Mary was like the last thing for me to really hit. I intellectually accepted her role and her special place, but actually fully embracing her motherhood was one of the last things for me. And yeah, I can, that is it's a throwback for me, honestly.
Okay, now you've made it serious. That was a funny clip, and you've just made it all serious.
Sorry.
Hello, Doctor from New Zealand. It's good to have you here. Anyway, so what made you suggest this movie to me, The Scarlet and the Black?
So for about the last 10 years, this has been one of my favorite Catholic movies. When I was a focus missionary at Benedictine College, there was not an RA, but the guy who oversaw the entire dorm who worked there. He wasn't a student. He was also a former focus missionary, former seminarian, and he took me through great Catholic films. And this was one that stood out to me, not only because it tells a great story, it tells it very well, but it also it does invite you to wrestle with some tough questions. If and when lying would be permissible, and whether you should take an active role or a passive role in being subversive against completely evil regimes. And on top of that, it just has a phenomenal cast. I mean, you've got Gregory Peck. So for anyone who hasn't seen it, just really quick, setting the stage. During World War II, there was a point at which the Nazis occupied Italy, and they occupied Rome. This was after Mussolini had fallen. So this was SS Nazi-controlled Italy, and specifically within Rome. And you have Gregory Peck, who famously was Atticus Finch in the movie adaptation of
To Kill a Mockingbird.
Yeah, To Kill a Mockingbird. And then, so he is an Irish Monsignor that ultimately takes it upon himself to be in charge of helping to hide refugees and Jews from the Nazis. And then on the other side, you have Christopher Plummer, ironically, who famously played Captain Von Trapp of The Sound of Music. So he's now in a completely opposite role where he's playing a Nazi willingly. And he's the head of the SS in Rome, and it's his job to stamp out the resistance, essentially. So it's just fascinating seeing such amazing characters and amazing actors that they got to portray them in a, based on true life drama. So for so many reasons, I think this is a fantastic film. I don't think that it's in general well enough known these days. I'd never heard of it until I had the former focus missionary taking me through all these films, and it remains a treasure to me to this day.
Yeah. So a few sort of minor sort of historical corrections. So there was still a Italian government in control of like the Germans weren't in control of Italy in the sense that there was still a fascist government. It was just there was sort of it was more or less a civil war between two different groups. But the Italian government was working towards possibly pulling out of the war, which really didn't go well with the fact that they had German troops in Italy. And then what was it? There was one other thing. I wouldn't call them refugees. I'd call them sort of military like prisoners, like fugitives, more like it. Like
military fugitives make sense.
Yeah, because refugees, the idea of refugees usually get in your head sort of people that like civilians that are hiding, except for the only people in that case were more or less the Jews.
So there were Jewish civilians that were being hidden.
But they wouldn't be refugees either because that's where they lived.
That's fair. That's fair.
So I just want to give people a more the concrete understanding.
I appreciate the correction.
So anyways, also Mr. C, Catholic layman, asked if that video that I showed in the beginning was from Moral Oriole, which I don't know. I think it is, but I don't know. I looked it up. It's some claymation thing. But anyways, so I mean, you got Gregory Peck, you've got Christopher Plummer. I mean, Christopher Plummer is playing a Nazi, which is quite entertaining to me since I grew up pretty much only knowing him as Captain Von Trapp. Which, I mean, he does badass really well in both in both characters. Now, also, what's great is both of these people are real, and I think it's just funny because if you're thinking of two people that were contemporaries, and they're both played by Christopher Plummer, so then in your head you're like, wow, Christopher Plummer was really busy during the 30s and 40s. Like he was just all over the place.
Indeed, he was.
And it interests. Like I don't think Plummer used an accent in the Sound of Music, if I recall. Do you recall that correctly?
If anything, it was very mild.
But he does use some sort of accent in this one.
Yeah, he definitely he played it up more for sure to make you know that he was German.
I think that's the sort of the villainous German versus the sort of the non-villainous
Lederhosen, ja.
He doesn't, and this movie does make some mistakes, at least from what I can tell, based on what was it? The sort of the corrections on Amazon. Like there's some trivia and stuff like that, and it's like errors within the movie. And I don't know if this is true, but like the outfit he's wearing or the uniform he's wearing in the beginning when he is introduced to the Pope, I think he was introduced to the Pope, and but he's wearing the black, which apparently they wouldn't be wearing the black. That was sort of that wasn't used anymore for the SS. It was a regular military uniform that was used at that time. According to Amazon, I could be wrong about that, or they could be wrong about that. But I found that very interesting.
And one possibility is that they were just trying to play up the name of it being the Scarlet and the Black. But...
Yes. Well, it doesn't make sense that you do the black. Though I guess I didn't think about that. That makes a lot of sense, but also it's a little bit historically inaccurate. But the SS are symbolized by the black uniforms.
Yeah, and The one thing, just to get it out of the way, in my opinion, that was the biggest mistake was the way that they portrayed Pope Pius XII. I think that they were very unfair in first making him overly cautious and then making him appear completely unaware of what the Monsignor was doing. Because in reality, Pius XII was actually personally helping and responsible for hiding Jews in Castel Gandolfo. Like, he was very proactive and he wasn't just completely passive. And that was actually something that was almost never, he was never accused of until the 60s, when there was a random play that came out and basically made it seem like, oh, well, Pope Pius XII was too passive and he allowed this to happen. And like, that's kind of a narrative that has taken over in a lot of like mainstream thought and portrayals. But the truth is that he actually was a very strong like proponent and activist in helping to hide Jews within Rome away from the SS.
Yes, though I didn't get the impression really that he was necessarily passive in the movie. I just thought I thought it was just a choice of who we're gonna focus on, because he seemed like he seemed like he still knew what was going on. It was just
Well, there was
like
the moment
caution.
of, yeah, like he was telling him like, we can't. All right, so in the movie they have Pius XII talking to the Monsignor and saying like, we can't, we can't violate Vatican neutrality, and like, we need to protect these people. And then he asks the Monsignor how many he's responsible for hiding. He's like, well, over 3,000. And that's when you have the moment of surprise with the Pope of like, so many. Like, it just makes it seem like he's very much on like, the Monsignor's been doing everything and the Pope has no clue just the depths of how many people he's helping to hide, which I just think was unfair to Pius XII.
Yeah, that's probably true. I thought it was just a style change or a stylist thing, because you can only have like, there was another sort of TV series recently. It was called Pius XII, where it sort of dealt with some of the same storylines, including like the gold, that the SS requested from the Jews and stuff like that. But Pius XII was much more active in the story in that one, and there is no Monsignor O'Flaherty in that story. So I don't know if it's just a story choice, or maybe they were purposely leaving that out. But anyways, I just don't think you can have like two main protagonists like that.
Yeah,
And
that's completely fair. I can understand that.
and I didn't think they made Pius XII appear like in any negative light. I don't think they made him like a butt of any joke or anything like that, which I thought was good.
Yeah, I don't think that it was so much like, I think for me, just the ways in which Pope Pius XII is typically talked about, it's either that he was too passive or he was, actively complying with the Nazis, where the fact of the matter is that it's actually the opposite. So like, I agree, like it makes sense for a stylistic choice to really highlight Monsignor O'Flaherty. I just think that because there's so much negative talked about with Pius XII with regards to World War II, it's something that should actively be worked against. That's all.
I agree.
I'm curious, what was Pius XII on? I haven't, like, what streaming service?
I think you can find it on Amazon. It's it's called Pius XII. Some things, like there's a subtitle to it, but if you look up
Okay.
Pius XII movie, you should be able to find it. He's played by James Cromwell. But the problem is with that one, it's way too focused on like this romantic story in the background, and like with the Jews themselves in the story, and it sort of takes you away from the dealings with the Catholic Church and the wider story. Like, I had seen that before I'd seen this, and I think this is just a much better movie. compared to this other story, because I had no idea like how much the church was actively doing. It almost oh yeah, see, Catholic layman has Pius XII under the Roman sky. Thank you.
Okay.
It doesn't give the church a lot of credit, and overall it gives Pius XII a little more credit. Like,
Yeah.
and the two Catholic main characters of that is, I think, Cardinal Montini and Pius XII. So both Paul VI and
Yeah.
Pius XII, which I don't think Montini is mentioned in this movie, though. I think he's the guy. If you ever see a bishop with Pius XII, that's I think that's supposed to be Montini, probably.
Yeah, that would make sense. Yeah, I don't think it was mentioned by name.
Now, I do want to talk a little bit about O'Flaherty's history. So
Please.
he grew up in Ireland, and he grew up amongst all of the sort of the troubles, not in the 90s, 1990s,
Yep.
of course, with troubles, but the 1920s and 1910s during the Irish Civil War and the Irish, the Easter Rising and stuff like that. And he was very much turned off by the British. So he had a very negative opinion of the British. And this is important going into sort of the situation where he's basically going to be facilitating the safety of many British troops that get trapped behind enemy lines in Rome.
Yes.
And sorry, he had a lot of decision making to do, because he was given, or he was basically like prejudged. If he prejudged the situation, he probably would have thought much more negatively about the British and the Americans. Which, I mean, to some degree, he's not wrong, but only in comparison would he be wrong in that. So he was, they think there's a line about him in the movie where he says that, he heard propaganda from both sides and just had to, look which side was telling the truth. And he decided that the West, the Allies, were telling more truth than the Nazis were.
Yeah, that was one of the things that early on I really appreciated, was the scene where he goes to the British ambassador and was asking for help. And the British ambassador, first of all, is saying basically, like, I'm a prisoner here. Like, I can't do anything without there being a lot of problems that arise from it. And like, so that he just had a very non-confrontational approach. But then on the back end, he sends his butler to basically end up being Monsignor O'Flaherty's right-hand man. They continue to send money through there, like, and it just showed that there was difficult political questions that had to be answered, and difficult waters that had to be navigated for any of the ambassadors and emissaries that were involved. But they were still trying their best to work on the back end, even if it was for their own means. Ultimately, like, he did receive British help, and he had to, like, at first, that's really interesting getting that backstory for him, because like his worst fears about the British were being confirmed during that meeting with the ambassador. And then 15 minutes later, the butler arrives with a pocket full of cash and like, I'm the biggest help you're going to have, because I know everybody and everything in the black market.
Mm-hmm. Also, the whole golf thing, the whole boxing thing, that's all right. That's all true. That's all like legitimate historical historical information. And also, for anybody who's sort of interested in sort of sort of the history post, like the Catholic Church history post Vatican II and stuff, like a lot of the changes regarding the Mass and stuff like that. During his time in the Vatican, Monsignor Flaherty was or his immediate superior was Cardinal Octaviani. Jeff, are you familiar with him?
It sounds familiar. It's not immediately ringing a bell.
So he was the bishop or cardinal that sort of wrote a letter to Paul VI, basically asking for I think some sort of restoration of the old mass.
Yeah, yep. Yeah, now that's where I'm remembering him from. I didn't know that he was directly underneath him. What was the cardinal's role, if you know off the top of your head?
I don't exactly know. I mean, I think he was definitely still within the Holy Office, but it would have been within sort of, I mean, the Holy Office of the Inquisition was the full title. So it must have been in that. I mean, none of what O'Flaherty was, was doing had anything to do with his job, actually. Like
Yeah.
none of, hold on. I think it's called the Octaviani intervention. Yes.
Yep. Yeah, that makes sense. Or like that does ring a bell. I'm remembering now.
Okay, it was a
from back from the days of old TNT.
Yes, I good times. It was written to Paul VI to criticize what theologians perceived as problems in the Mass of Paul VI, which had been promulgated the earlier year. Anyways, I think, I'm pretty sure Octaviani was his main boss, though it might have been also somebody with a very similar name to Octaviani. So unless there was somebody in the Vatican during the 40s with a pretty similar name, it's very possible that I could be getting the names wrong. I was listening to it on Audible, so I didn't have it written in front of me. But yeah, so we have him working under Octaviani, from what I can tell, and apparently their personalities were very different. Octaviani was very much sort of very conservative in personality and very much like cool and calm and stuff like that, and not very energetic. But O'Flaherty was this sort of personality, this big personality, always going to all these parties, golfing and stuff like that, which I think it was frowned upon prior to in that area for cardinals to go, or members of the office to be going golfing. But Octaviani didn't seem to have a problem with it necessarily. And according to some biography, Octaviani did a lot to protect O'Flaherty during his work.
Yeah, that is interesting. And it kind of fits into the stereotype of like the old aristocratic Roman versus the fiery Irishman.
It does, yes. And I mean, I think, the balance that they're trying to maintain is sort of the neutrality of the Vatican. And I've heard this multiple times that they were afraid of plans that were drawn up to invade Vatican City, but I don't know if that's actually true. I know that was a fear, but I don't know if there is any legitimate plan that the Nazis came up with to invade, because there's a lot of these different things that were sort of put out there back in the day. There was this concept that they thought the Nazis were planning on invading America and stuff like that, but there were no such plans. Even there were no plans to invade Austria before the Anschluss. That was a sort of a spring of the moment type of thing. Like that was all. A lot of what happened that led to World War II was all very unplanned and just kind of just happened.
Yeah. So two things about that. First, in general, when you're in a war, you make plans even if you don't plan on actually carrying them out. So I don't know the historicity of whether there were those plans, but it's very likely, in my opinion, that they would have that the Nazis would have at least considered, if we had to invade the Vatican, what would it look like? Doesn't mean that they necessarily were planning on carrying that out. And the second thing is, on the side of the Vatican, they didn't have to know for sure that there was a plan to do that to be worried about it.
Sure.
They would have had to, make their own contingencies. But it was a really good. I loved the narrative point, which did actually happen, of the white stripe being drawn around Vatican City. That was saying, like, this is how far your jurisdiction goes. You can't go anywhere else. Which is just like, for those who don't know the history of the Vatican or the Papal States having existed until until after 1850. Like, it was, I think, in the 1870s that the full unification of Italy happened. There was a full chunk of Italy, what we now call Italy, that was directly under the political rule of the Pope, and that was shrank down to just Vatican City, which is now one of the, if not the smallest city-states in the world. So just 70 years removed from that, they had the Nazis drawing a huge line around Vatican City, saying, if you basically, especially to Monsignor, but others as well, as soon as you're out of here, you no longer have jurisdiction, and we can do whatever we want to you.
Indeed. I that's one of the reasons why I like this movie so much better than that Under the Roman Sky one, because it's just, that's not the political element of the Vatican is not focused too much on. And Kepler is such an interesting character because interesting enough, he was ordered.
So Kepler was the one that was played by Christopher Plummer, for those who haven't seen it yet.
So Christopher Plummer as Kepler was so great, though interesting enough, he was like 30 years too old to play Kepler.
Yep.
Like Kepler was like or maybe 20 years or whatever. Kepler was in his like 30s, and Plummer was like in his 50s or something like that, or even 60s, something like that. So he definitely, I mean, both Peck and Plummer give this very sort of charismatic and elder statesman kind of
vibe,
to the characters. And Kepler's actually quite interesting because he was ordered. So there's a part in the story where the Jews are ordered to hand over how much, I don't remember how much,
like 100 pounds of gold or something like that.
Yeah. So this amount of gold, and interesting enough, Kepler wasn't actually ordered to do that. He was ordered to remove them. He was ordered to take all the Jews away. So, and this was actually his attempt at avoiding it. He was actually not following orders when he did this. Basically, his mentality was, he thought the idea of moving the Jews from Rome was ridiculous. He thought it was a terrible move, like a terrible strategic move. He thought it was stupid. So he created this idea to do the gold, and then when they got the gold, the Catholic Church helped provide a lot part of the gold. I don't know how much of the gold, that's not really stated in the movie, but which I felt so sad, having him hand Monsignor O'Flaherty handed over like a golden crucifix that he had, and that just made me really sad. I was even kind of like, is this right? Like, should they be handing like this type of gold? Like, over, for this
Yeah.
purpose. I mean, I get the reasoning, but it's also like holy things.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that I like about this movie is it does present some difficult questions that don't have great answers. Because, like, there's the common atheist argument, well, sell the Vatican and feed the poor. And, like, not only would that be completely inadequate to handle anything sustained, but there's also the fact that, the churches, the goods, the beauty that are available within the churches are a benefit to all. Like, they're museums that tell the gospel that anyone can go into without charge. And those are treasures that don't have a value to them. But at the same time, human life is also of inestimable value. So when it's a matter of, trading over a holy object to be able to save lives, but then knowing that that object is going to fund an evil regime, there's no clear and easy or non-messy answer, because you don't want to condemn people to death if you could have prevented it, but you also don't want to fund evil and just hold on to your own possessions to keep that from happening. So it's just something that, there's no clear and easy answer to, and it's something that can be debated about.
Well, yeah. Well, it's not, but it's also not condemning someone to death because you're not the one doing it.
Right, but it's the question of, if you could have intervened and you didn't, do you still bear some of the blame? I'm not saying that there's an easy answer to it. I'm just saying,
it's an interesting difficulty. Also, with the fact that, I mean, for hindsight's 2020, but that it basically led to them getting taken away anyways, because Kepler got the order later, and this isn't really part of the story. This is, Kepler is portrayed sort of as uniformly bad in all aspects without any good qualities, which I understand that portrayal, but there's that you can have a villain of nuance too.
For those who haven't seen it yet, in the movie, the way that they portray his reasoning for it was like, he was basically thinking, again, this is as the movie portrayed it, was, well, we want to get this money from the Jews anyways, and we want to take them away. So let's make them think that they can get away, get all of their gold, and then we'll still take them anyways. So they're just saving us the trouble of having to look for it.
Yeah.
So that's again like the pure evil portrayal, not the historical Kepler.
Yes, exactly. And in a more real fashion, he wasn't like trying to protect the Jews necessarily, but he was just he was more pragmatic in his thinking. And it was only until he got the order that, that he had to do this, that like a double order, basically. He refused, he didn't follow through the first order. He received a second order. Then he removed the Jews from Rome.
Or at least tried to.
Well, yes. But, I mean, in this case, he pretty much achieved it because they were, it was a surprise. Nobody saw it coming, right?
Yeah, I'm just saying, yes, a large majority was able to be removed, but there still were some that were able to be secreted away and hid by the Vatican and others as well.
Mm-hmm. And it's a lot of fun watching sort of the, like, it's kind of a little bit like sort of a, what's it called? What's that movie with Robert Redford? The Sting. It's kind of a little bit like it feels like a little bit about a Sting with sort of the priests and these different members meeting, and they have code names and everything else, which is true. They all had code names, and the Monsignor's was Golf, and the others are a little incorrectly portrayed, but they fit the spirit of it very well. And it was the idea of, in real life, it was the idea of a British spy who was sent to work among them. So part of the organization, I mean, of course, O'Flaherty was very much, just focused on keeping people safe. But there was an allied element of spying and sabotage going on in the background, sort of, that O'Flaherty wasn't necessarily told about all the time. He didn't really know what was going on. It was kind of, they sort of used his network and stuff like that in order to do these things, which I don't think is very smart, because it really it put the Monsignor and his people in a lot more danger if that fell apart.
Yeah, and they didn't directly show that in the movie, but they did still pose the question of like the passive hiding of Jews versus active resistance with the other priest that ended up being captured and ultimately killed in the prison that he snuck into Regina Caeli to visit and give last rites to. Like the question was just asked, like, for especially a clergyman, what is the proper role? Like, is it okay for them to take up arms versus taking a more passive and pastoral role, which is a question that is very much of the modern age, because in the Middle Ages we had, the Knights. I know they have bad rap now, but the Knights Templar and the Hospitallers and other specifically oriented fighting orders of like priests and monks, where they weren't just there to pray and administer the sacraments, but they were also out actively fighting to help reclaim the Holy Land and things along those lines.
Yeah, though I think it's a little different with priests, because I don't think the Knights Templar were priests.
No, I think there were other orders that did have some along the, I certainly could be wrong.
I thought it was more like a sort of a almost lay monks from what I thought, but I could be wrong about that. That was just my impression, because sort of how they so I mean, religious in nature, but also not, but also kind of secular. They were sort of a mesh between the secular and religious.
Yeah, they were Catholic military orders, and I think I was just misinterpreting them being orders in general.
Well, they definitely had a sort of religious element of it. It just
right.
wasn't,
I was connecting that to holy orders, which I don't think is accurate.
Yeah, I don't know if there was holy orders in it, because to me at least, because one of the leaders of, or one of the people who was most supportive of the Templars was Saint Bernard of Clairvaux, and it's not like he was a member of the order. So I would imagine if he was so supportive, if that was the thing in the order, then he might have joined. But I don't think he was part of that. I think he was just sort of outside supporter as a priest.
Yeah, he definitely was.
Didymus says that the Vatican was receiving intelligence from inside the German military and transmitting it to Britain. I'm not surprised. The German resistance was very active. Many of them were Catholics, or Catholic aristocrats, and other military officers like Colonel von Stauffenberg. And
it's also an underappreciated fact that, second to maybe the Americans, Russians, and British, the Vatican actually has one of the more sophisticated intelligence gathering capabilities throughout the world, which is pretty crazy to think about for it being so small, but also the fact that the Catholic Church is the largest organization on the face of the earth.
Well, I've thought about writing sort of, and I've even dabbled with it a little bit, but I've thought a lot about writing a Catholic spy novel. And I would have just a lot of questions. I think I need to talk to a priest about where it morally would be justified and how it could work morally. Because you talk about it, you talk about lying, these papers and stuff like that. When is this justified? Now, it seems to me that they're taking sort of the Jesuit position on this, because the Dominican position is no lying ever.
Yep.
Under no circumstances should you lie. It would be a sin either in any case. Maybe venial, but still a sin. And I'm not familiar enough with the Jesuit position, but that quite interests me. Have you?
Yeah.
Are you familiar with it?
Yeah. So 2 things. First of all, if you haven't already, highly recommend Tom Clancy. He's got not the movies. Most of the movies are just garbage. And
even the Harrison Ford ones.
Harrison Ford, it's all right. It's not perfect, but especially the stuff. As much as I love John Krasinski, it's not Jack Ryan. Like, that's just pure garbage.
Okay.
But Tom Clancy himself was Catholic and incredibly well researched, and in several of the books he actually talks about Jack Ryan interacting with priests and prelates from the Holy See and interchanging information and getting messages across through them. And one of the books is actually about the attempt on Pope St. John Paul II's life that happened. So there's it is interesting for that. So he has a lot of insights there that are at least much better researched than I ever will be. But when it comes to, I don't know if this is specifically the Jesuit position, but the most common position I've heard for those who say it's okay to lie to the Nazis to protect people is that as a matter of justice, it's giving to each what they are due. That's what the virtue of justice is. And in those situations, the Nazis don't deserve the truth. They have no reason to receive it because they are seeking to do evil. So in that situation, justice actually would dictate that you don't tell them, or I'd say that you don't have to, because they have no reason or need for the truth. Now, the counter argument that you could make is, well, you just say to them, I'm not going to answer because you don't deserve an answer. But then if that is going to lead directly to the death of 3 people you're trying to hide and probably your family because you were hiding them, it's not an easy answer, right, one way or another. But I can at least, I'm very sympathetic to that line of argument.
I'm very sympathetic to that too. I think I've heard that there was a debate, I think, on Pints with Aquinas between Janet Smith and Father Gregory Pine. I think it was on Pints with Aquinas. Anyways, so that's something people can go to if they want to, hear that debate. Have you seen that one, Jeff?
No, not particularly. I did touch on it actually when I was on. I did a podcast with Adrian Fonseca on Catholic Conversations, and we discussed the cardinal virtues, and we briefly touched on the fact that we actually disagreed on that particular question of if you can lie under any circumstance.
Because he's Dominican.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah, well, he's not a Dominican, but he's
Dominican influenced.
Dominican adjacent.
Mm-hmm.
Anyways, yeah, so that's an interesting argument. Now, I want to go back to an important part of the movie. So, they've been hiding people, but the Nazis are cracking down. They are no longer accepting the Vatican passports. And one of the guys that Malta, I can't remember what her name is. One of the ladies who actually in the real life she had 5 girls and 1 boy, or sorry,
Oh.
6 girls maybe. Anyways, she had a lot more kids. So that she has only like 2 daughters in the actual movie, but she has like 5. So it's and I don't know. That's a lot, and a lot to have with also taking people in, and a lot to risk. Just very very much. So, but she was Swiss, so she had a lot more protection. I think she had a Swiss passport. So anyway, so this the one of her daughters and this guy, this was he British or American? Do you remember?
I think it was American, at least in the movie.
Okay, an American soldier stopped. He is held up to the side, and one of his book gets arrested, and his book with some of the information about the organization, including code names and stuff like that, are taken. And that night, the Monsignor and Malta and the Count, who's also a member of the organization, are at the opera, and so is Kepler and his family, and they confront each other in a very funny sort of a funny way, and this basically Monsignor asks for his autograph.
And he pretended that it was like the program for the night.
Wait, what do you mean program?
Well, like, because they were at the opera, and
what did he have him sign an order? I thought he just signed it and then replicated it later.
Oh, sorry, yeah, you're right. I think that he did have him actually sign the program, and then later he copied it.
Yeah, he signed the program for him, and sort of exalted him. Played it up like he appreciated the colonel.
And Kepler's response of just, well, sure, why not?
Sure. Yeah, playing on ego is a good move. Anyways, and they sort of go their separate ways. They had sort of a jovial conversation. And then the next morning, the prisoner was released under the orders of Colonel Kepler, and Kepler realizes that it obviously, well, he was like, it wasn't me, and then he sees that it's his signature, and it's obvious that the Monsignor had sort of forged his signature on there as an order, having him released so he couldn't interrogate the guy about anything. But he did figure out their code names and sort of somewhat of ability to decipher sort of some of the secrets that they were, the code that they were using. And that led to them having to move people really quickly. Some people got captured or killed, but they had to move quickly to move people.
Yeah. Do you know if that was a historical event that he actually got his autograph?
I don't know yet. That's something I hadn't gotten to.
Because that would be fascinating if it was.
Yes, that would be. I'll have to do sort of maybe a quick video covering sort of historical things, after I finish my research about this. But anyways, it was just it's such an epic. It's sort of I think it's the first meeting between Gregory Peck's character and Christopher Plummer's character. First of 3.
There's only 3 throughout an entire 2.5 hour epic film. Total screen time together is less than 6 minutes. And it's the cinematography, the storytelling behind it builds up so perfectly to each of those that it starts off kind of jovial. He gets the autograph. The next one, they have butting heads and shouting at each other. And then the final confrontation is truly it. I don't want to, I'm happy to spoil it if we give the spoiler alert, but it's
hold on for now.
Yeah, we don't have to get to it right now, but just each of them builds up so much. the fact that they were able to make those so electric, each of those scenes, you were waiting with bated breath. You had no clue what was going to happen. But it's all, I don't know if each particular thing, but the overall story is true to life. It just is incredible. And, it makes you appreciate the way that they were able to tell the story.
Yes, the overall story is very true. Some of those moments might be taking liberties, but the overall story is definitely true, especially the ending, which we'll get to. But but this obviously puts a target on the Monsignor's back. He later he is cornered at the prince's palace or whatever it was. I can't. They switched the names. Those names aren't correct, but there is a guy.
Yeah.
There is I think he was a count or something that was helping him, that lived there, and it was, so that part's true. And he is cornered, and he disguises himself as a coal man, and in the movie, he has, the coal man guy is like, you'll have to punch me out, father, which is hilarious, and he does, because
he's a boxer.
Yeah, he's a boxer. So which also, this is a great sort of spiritual sequel to what was it, The Quiet Man? I don't know if you're familiar with that.
It's been a long time, but generally, yes.
Okay, yeah, with John Wayne.
Yeah.
Also boxer and stuff like that. It's just, Irish, a lot of connections, I'd say. Spirit, not literal connections, but just some little connections. And then anyways, he dresses up as the coal man and then escapes back to the Vatican.
And there was the other time that he escaped to the Italian countryside and was in like Malta's villa outside, and he's like, no, I have to go back. There's still more for me to do. So he, at least according to the movie, he dressed up again as an SS officer and like was trying to march his way in, and ended up being chased through the streets of Rome and climbs over the wall to get into Vatican City.
Yeah, and the story of the Coleman is completely accurate. Like that totally happened. He did dress up as a Coleman and got away. So that also, there is, so like later in the movie, he dresses up as all different types of things to try and
one time he was a Jewish street peddler.
One time he's a nun.
Yep.
Which there's one person who says that happened, like one eyewitness that says that it really did happen. So I wouldn't say that it's completely true, but there is one source that says that it happened.
So you're not saying it's complete nonsense?
Oh,
sorry. He just shouldn't have gotten into the habit of it, at least.
Okay. Thank you for the levity. Good thing Margot's not in the comments.
It's true. I'll be hearing about it tomorrow, I'm sure.
Who knows? Anyways, so that anyway, so I don't know if that's completely true, but it's definitely, there's some reasonable evidence that may have happened. Which is kind of interesting. He would just been like a mass. I mean, he's portrayed as like a massive nun in it, like him dressed.
Yeah, he's like 6'4" or something.
So like it's insane. How?
Yep.
But like they weren't looking for a nun. Like they were looking for a Monsignor.
Yeah.
There is another moment which isn't really a interaction between O'Flaherty and Kepler, but he is sort of like he's standing by the line, and Chris and Kepler is preparing to take a shot at him if he crosses the line. And it's just
you see him like
stare down.
tiptoeing along it.
He's just playing with them. It's just it's a funny psyching out your opponent, basically.
Yeah, one of the things it reminded me of, like, there's one moment at which, like, it shows you through the sniper's lens, like they're honing in on the Monsignor, and he just puts his hands behind his back and looks up straight into the camera, like into the sniper's lens. And that shot just made me think of another one of my favorite movies, Rear Window, where there's just one scene where you've been watching this character from afar, and then all of a sudden he just looks and stares straight into the camera, and you're like, oh shoot, like he knows now. But anyways, I loved that moment as well. That was a really great interplay of just like, I'm right here, I'm not going anywhere, deal with it.
Yeah, and Pius XII is also kind of like watching over the balcony, sort of not at that exact moment, I don't think, but sort of at these times when Monsignor is sort of out and about, sort of not crossing the line, but sort of outside the line or inside the line and stuff like that. My question only is, if you're on the line, are you in danger, or do you actually have to be across the line?
I think in the way that they had set it up was the line is so it's like American football versus soccer. Like, I think it was more like American football. If you touch the line, you're out, you're done, you have no protection anymore. Whereas like with soccer, so long as one portion of the ball is still inside the line, you're safe.
I know nothing about soccer.
That's fair.
Anyways, that was just a fun moment. I just think Pius XII sort of overlooking and sort of being sort of somewhat of a guide. He gives guidance to a Flaherty, and I think he makes good points too. About sort of about the role of the church. And this is one of the criticisms that the church got, even in Germany a lot too, is that they were more focused on protecting the church itself and its flock than maybe everybody else. But that's kind of the church's job, first and foremost. And I think Pius XII is right about that.
Yeah, that's a completely fair point. And it goes back to that earlier discussion of, handing over sacred vessels to potentially save others. Like,
I don't know if he did sacred vessels.
Well, it wasn't sacred vessels, sorry, but just, a golden crucifix is still blessed. A sacred object. Yeah, blessed. Yeah.
Blessed items. Yeah, that would be that. Yeah, it's just more sad to me than anything else. I don't know if that's real, to be honest. Maybe not, but I don't know where else the gold would have come from. I guess that would be.
Well, he had a lot of parishioners that are, other lay Catholics he may have been able to reach out to because he had such an incredible network. Yeah,
he was sort of the best socialite you could possibly be, in the best possible way too. Father did his friend making so well that he was able to turn it into a almost like a spy ring, even though it wasn't spying. It was sort of, I don't even know what's the best way to call it, sort of
just a network,
I guess. A safety network.
So obviously removing any form of sexual connotation or relationships, like the impression I kind of got was him as a bit of a playboy, just in the sense that he was very much a socialite. He was out with people. He was at the biggest, fanciest parties. He had the connections with the counts and the dukes. Like, he was very well known in the high social circles within Rome. And that's how he was able to do so much.
I mean, I wouldn't use the word playboy, but
yeah, I was just taking certain connotations from it. There could be other better words for it.
I don't know what it would be. I mean, he was just a social animal. He was quite good at what he, and that's what one of the big differences between like him and Octaviani. They were basically opposites in that regard.
Yeah.
And but he did make some funny jokes about sort of like, his safety was with numbers, meaning, witnesses, like he was never to be alone, with these women and stuff like that. He was only, he was out in public pretty much. So, it seemed like he had a good understanding of being cautious in that type of way. But also knowing how to be social as well.
Yeah. So one of the scenes that I think was the most moving, I alluded to it earlier, but one of his like right-hand men within the organization was a priest who was captured, and like they had him dead to rights with all the evidence to know that he was a part of the organization. I think he was armed.
Well, it wasn't that he was a part of the organization. It was that he was he was part of the partisans.
Oh, right. Yeah, because he wasn't just a part of the organization. He was also in the active partisan resistance. That's right. But so he's taken to Castel Gandolfo, which usually is actually a safe haven for the Pope, but was being used...
No. Rorate Caeli prison?
No, yeah, sorry, you're right. Yeah, Rorate Caeli. He was in that prison. And Monsignor O'Flaherty dresses up as an officer and sneaks his way in to be able just to hear his last confession, give him a blessing, and hand him a rosary, knowing that he's going to his death, but that there's nothing more that he could do. I just thought that was such a beautiful sacrifice on his part to take that risk, but also knowing that he couldn't do anything else to, try to get him out. So he was going to give him the most beautiful gift he could, which is that final absolution.
Yeah, that was beautiful. I thought it was weird, though, that they sort of talked about it, but then it wasn't really on screen.
They didn't show like an actual confession and absolution.
But they also cut away, so it could be assumed that that's what happened after they cut away. But what's funny is you saw Cabrini, right?
No, I haven't. My wife has.
Okay. Well, I actually think this movie is substantially more religious in nature than Cabrini was. Like, I think there were more overt sort of Catholic things specifically attributed to Catholicism versus Cabrini. Like, there's some stuff that's mentioned, but it's also, delivered in somewhat of a secular framing too, like it in a way that it isn't like specifically Catholic, but in this movie it seems extremely specific to
I think that's
Catholicism.
I haven't seen it, so I can't respond to that particularly, but I can at least agree for this movie that its Catholicism is very overt and not in any way hidden behind anything secular.
Yeah, and I'm not like, I didn't think Cabrini was bad. I just think it was not. I think this is a more Catholic film in a weird way by people that weren't trying to make a movie probably geared towards Catholics. Of course, this was in the 80s, so a very different time. But even still, I think if you're making a movie for sort of Christian conservative audience, I don't think
where it's explicitly about a saint, not just about people within the church.
Yeah, I don't think you should be holding back. While in the 80s with this movie, which is just a really interesting story. They didn't hold back at all from the Catholicity, and there's a lot of scenes of praying and him in some liturgical situation, not like a mass or anything necessarily, but just you can tell that there's more to it. It's alluding to more things, while in Cabrini it's almost used more as an aesthetic and sort of a personal background than anything else. Like kind of like a personal thing instead of a I don't know.
So one thing I think would be interesting to discuss at some point would be like a compare and contrast between A Man for All Seasons and Cabrini.
Oh, A Man for All Seasons is so much better.
Right. I'm not saying it's not. I'm just saying I think that could be a really good discussion of like A Man for All Seasons. There's so much that is just dealing with the politics of his day because St. Thomas More was dealing with that in his day-to-day life. And like the Catholicism isn't like, it's not beating you over the head with it, but it is very present. So I think it would be, again, I haven't seen Cabrini, but I think doing a compare and contrast could be an interesting exercise.
Well, like in that movie, I mean, you make a great suggestion, but in movie, Man for All Seasons, the political element, everything is connected with the church inherently. So there is literally no hiding from the Catholic Church. There's only one thing that they kind of misunderstand about Thomas More, and that it's all about conscience. It's not about truth necessarily, though it's that he believes it's true. But that doesn't inhibit the story in any capacity. Just because that's oddly kind of minor in the story.
Okay, yeah, I can see that. But I think we can both agree that Beckett is superior to both.
There's no
I'm just playing with you.
Oh, okay. So you don't think Beckett's superior?
I think Beckett is phenomenal. I'm just saying we don't have to go down that rabbit hole.
Well, the sort of nudity aspect is the only thing I criticize.
That's
Beckett.
Completely fair. But
it's just unnecessary.
Yes, it completely is. But the excommunication scene is
okay. This is
chilling.
Yes,
that's why I said we can pull it back. We can pull it back.
That's a totally different podcast, Jeff. I love your enthusiasm. That is a different podcast.
Yes, it is.
We're already over an hour.
So shall we get to the conclusion then?
Yes. So I mean, so we have the intense meeting between the two of them, where basically, in some ways, Gregory Peck or Father Flaherty really provokes and
Kepler.
calls Kepler out, but also, and earlier, I do think there's some like liberal propaganda in the movie periodically. Sort of his like these arguments about like democracy and stuff like that, as if like religious freedom type of thing, which this is pre-Vatican II in the movie, so that wouldn't even be like, it wouldn't even be a controversy that the church was very much more stalwart against religious freedom of non-Catholic religions, at least the way we think about it in a liberal society. So I think there's just some of that where you're putting words into his mouth that I doubt he said, and I just think it's probably assumptions.
But can I just set the stage and then you can go through the scene?
Sure.
So as we're reaching the end of the movie, we have the situation where Kepler has realized the SS, the Nazis, are done. The Allies are right on their tails. They're going to be overtaking Rome. any minute, basically. And he he wakes his wife up in the middle of the night and like, you don't understand. You need to get everything and go. Like, she just isn't comprehending that everything they've known in their life to this point is done and there's no going back. So Kepler realizes the situation, and he, through back channels, actually reaches out to Monsignor O'Flaherty and asks for them to have a meeting that then they end up having within the colonnades in the Colosseum. And Connor, I'll let you describe the scene itself, but it's just so much emotional baggage leading into this scene.
Yeah, it's. I mean, the two actors are quite stellar, and of course, Monsignor is like taken at gunpoint and brought to this place by one of the Nazis, and basically, the Kepler goes on and on about sort of weirdly enough about like the virtues of the Third Reich and stuff like that. And how they'll come back, how they'll return and stuff like that. And then it suddenly turns into him pleading in a not so like weak manner, but in a very confident manner for Monsignor to get his family out. And O'Flaherty is really confronted with this, with the person he has despised this whole time, and that
has led to his friends' deaths.
Oh yes, and a lot of sacrifices that he's had to make, and he is resistant to, very resistant and fiery about his resistance to helping the colonel and his family. But the colonel makes a plea that this is what Catholicism is about. This is part of Catholicism: the forgiveness, the willingness to help others in need, no matter who they are. And you don't know. And basically, Monsignor leaves. Like he seemingly has rejected any possibility of helping the colonel. And then the next scene is him in prison. And again, this is all spoilers, but whatever. It's
for a 45-year-old movie.
Yeah,
you don't
exactly.
really have to worry about it.
Sure. Colonel Kepler is in prison by the Allies, and he basically they make it sound like they want to know everything about what's been going on, and and they talk about his family, and he's like, what about my family? He thinks they have his family, and he's like, where is my family? He's like, they're like, we don't know. Where'd you hide them? Like they've left the city. They somehow got away. And it basically is very clear that the Monsignor aided in the escape of his family to Switzerland. And it's just funny to me that in movies where he's in the 30s and 40s, his family, Christopher Plummer's family, always ends up in Switzerland.
I mean, it's not a place that I've ever wanted to live, but I've heard the flag is a big plus.
I'm so sorry, everyone, for that. That's why we have the Puntiff with us. We can't be here without some puns. Anyways, so the Christopher Plummer's, like, his facial expression is amazing and shocking. Then Pius XII basically congratulates Monsignor O'Flaherty for his work and all that. And so that's the main story.
But there's one thing that is really important for the postscript that they give.
Oh, well, yes, but that's the story. So the aftermath is that
and all of this is legitimately true.
Oh yeah, I was going to talk about the historical part. I mean, this is an old movie, so there's more information, about these people. There's in the postscript of the movie, it basically says that Colonel Kapler was visited monthly by O'Flaherty in Italian prison, and he had been imprisoned for life, and he converted to Catholicism. The SS colonel converted after many years of visits from O'Flaherty. So he had turned around his thought process. Probably not as much as some people might think. I think people think that sort of the Nazi mindset is so far afield, but I think it's just an extreme that that is actually, far, like, closer in some ways than, like, modern progressive liberalism. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's kind of like being able to convert Paul of Tarsus, the persecutor of the church, as opposed to just some lukewarmo who really cares.
Or
Like,
even
if you're-
somebody like or even maybe you could say, like, if they had converted the apostate, what's his name?
Justinian.
No, not Justinian. That wasn't the apostate. Julian. Julian the apostate. That type of person, sort of persecuting the church for kind of maybe opposite reasons as Saul of Tarsus. Like, Saul of Tarsus was persecuting the church for very different reasons from Julian the apostate. So, and I think Julian, you could argue, was further away from the church than Saul of Tarsus.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Anyway, so Kepler converts, and this is not something you get in the postscript, but he escaped prison near the end of his life, back to West Germany and from Italy.
Wow.
Anyways, and the West Germans had basically been pleading with the Italians to let him go because he was very sick and, basically not a threat to anybody. So he was, and the Italians tried to get him extradited back from West Germany, but they refused to let him go, let him back send him. They refused to send him back to Italy.
That's fascinating. I did not know that.
Yeah, I don't really know much about, like, the context of that, but it's just quite a weird situation because I don't think the West German there were a lot of people that got, like, off on the Nuremberg trials and stuff like that. Like, I think there's a surprising amount of, like, Nazis that didn't get executed and either went to prison for a little bit, but then didn't end up there.
Yeah.
Anyways, so that's a crazy story. The whole thing is absolute bonkers.
Yeah, and just, like, not only was it told so well, but you just have to wonder, even if it wasn't that colossal clash of personalities in the Colosseum of all places, even if it was just a letter that was sent, the difficulty that Monsignor O'Flaherty had to struggle with to show mercy, and part of it had to be that he wasn't showing mercy to this man. He was showing mercy to an innocent family that was not guilty of the deaths of so many, but he knew would be killed otherwise. But he still had to struggle with that and did end up showing that mercy. Would there have been any chance of redemption and conversion for Kepler had he not been willing to show that mercy and be Christ to him.
Yeah, it's really beautiful. Also, but O'Flaherty, this isn't the first time that he looked over people's past, or the past of different groups and people, because he had to sort of do the same thing with the British.
Yeah, you're absolutely right.
And it was arguably much more close to, or both situations were very close to home for him, like very
Yeah.
personal. The stuff in Italy, very personal. The stuff in Ireland, extremely personal. And he had to grapple with both of them, and he had to sort of probably go against his sort of his I don't know, like his desires,
Yeah, his passions.
and his just anger. He had to not fall into those traps. So it's just a beautiful
Yeah.
story, and I encourage any of you and all of you to watch it.
Yeah, this is one of my favorite movies for a reason, and yeah, it's certainly not perfect, but it gives you a lot to think about, and it's a really great story, and it's told very well. So just like Connor, I would highly recommend, if you get the chance, watch it.
Now I'm going to bring us off on a quick tangent. I saw this interesting video on Twitter. Also, it's a little less related to this, but it's actually it's with one of the guys from Monty Python and the Holy Grail. And it's not funny, unfortunately. It's very serious. So, but it's very interesting to me.
And you said the only snag is that the entire population of medieval London is going to be killed or injured on the roads every year. That's the only trouble. There's going to be 30 or 40,000 people. You'd think twice about living in this day and age.
Well, that's true. That is true. But I mean, the sanitation and all, you've grown used to loos and cleanliness. And I mean, you have all your own teeth, I can see. But I mean, it was a bit...
Except for this one, somebody else. There, yeah.
You're breaking it in for somebody
Yeah.
else. Yeah. It was a bit squalid, though, wasn't it?
Well, I think it was probably less squalid than we imagine. I mean, obviously, it's not going to be all shiny plastic surfaces and things like that. But I think that people had to live, and they did have concepts of health. I think we have a very kind of... I think we were brought up to believe in progress, and this idea that we're living on this this increasing line where everything's getting better and better all the time. And I don't think things are really. I mean, you just take something like medicine.
You're a reactionary, aren't you, really?
I am. Yes, you're right, Harry. I am.
Marching backwards. That's the way you want to go.
Well, no, I think things sort of move around. I think what is important to find out what was good about the Middle Ages and about the past, and to learn from the past, and not to have not to live in this kind of cloud cuckoo land where we think everything is improving.
Well, you're not all that keen on progress.
Well, I don't believe it's happening. That's the thing. I think we're kidding ourselves a lot of the time, and I think it's something like Monty Python and the Holy Grail. In a way, it looked convincing to us because it made the Middle Ages look so dirty, because it's kind of pandering to our kind of inflated view of how we're living now.
What do you think about that, Jeff?
I think that it does speak to like the depth of I think that it's very insightful, and I think that the best comedians are the ones who understand the flaws in their own views. Like John Cleese is not somebody I agree with on a lot of things, but he does have good insights. And I think that it's very accurate that we, kind of lie to ourselves that everything about progress is good and beneficial. Yes, we do have better sanitation, and it is easier to be able to...
Just so you know, that was Terry Jones.
Right, yeah, I was just saying John Cleese is another guy who's another British... Yeah,
just for everybody else, too.
Yeah, but I was just saying, like, in general, with another British comedian. But, yeah, I think that you can only make fun of something when you actually understand it. That's one of the reasons why the left can't meme. They don't understand what we're trying to say, so they can't parody it. But it's only when you actually understand it that you have a chance at good humor. And yeah, I think that was a really insightful and self-honest moment for him.
Well, it's just very interesting because this I believe this is a very mainstream like interviewer. I don't really know much about him, but I think he was one of the main interviewers like back in the 80s and stuff like that for the BBC. So, and he has such a boomer concept of reality that all he thinks
you're
of,
reactionary, aren't you?
well, I mean, but he is the guy. He is, and to be honest, you kind of have to be, because you're reacting to the idea of progress and the fact that it is a falsehood. And I just think it's incredibly interesting seeing somebody sort of say that to the face of kind of progress. I mean, he was sort of the narrative's face of progress. You know, if you had told, it's like telling Rachel Maddow that progress doesn't exist, something like that. You know, it's you know, Didymus is saying that the progress called is sacred cow. It's very true that this idea, of course, that like you can't learn from other like times, and that everything that people are basically different and better now is just utterly ridiculous to me. Anyway, so I just thought that was a wonderful thing. It's not really I mean, it's kind of related in the sense that we're looking back and we're watching a movie about a historical event and trying to gain some insights from it, but also this guy's pointing out that sort of a lot of the propaganda against other time periods is sort of is just this false belief in progress.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right.
So Jeff, so you were on Catholic Conversations recently. Any other shows you've been on recently?
The other one that I've done a little bit ago was Finding the Faith with Frida. She's it's at She's Based Babe or something like that on Twitter, but it's Finding the Faith. She's on Rumble, and I'll be on again with her in a few weeks to talk about the 14 rules for the discernment of spirits from St. Ignatius of Loyola. Okay, awesome. We're going to be doing more movie reviews, movie discussions in the future, and I look forward to those. Anything before we go? Really appreciate you having me on. I'm glad that you watched this movie and were willing to take this suggestion, because this is a movie I love talking about. I'm glad I took the suggestion too. If anybody else has any movies you that you want to suggest in the comments, please for me to watch and review and discuss. Maybe I'll force Jeff to do it as well, to watch it if he hasn't seen it. But other than that, please like, share, comment, and subscribe. And God bless. Bye, everyone.